world of YouTube, and welcome to the listening log update for July of 2020. Now, I originally wanted to talk about 10 records, but I'm going to hold off on one of them until next month, so we've got 9 records on the docket to discuss. A lot of surprise releases that I didn't expect to come out. So one of the requests I had on the docket, I'm getting out of the way this time, and a little bit of catch-up and stuff that I was excited for as well. We got a handful of stuff, so let's just dive on in. Now, I started off with one of the requests that I've had sitting on the docket, the new Æges record, Drømmen, which came out earlier this year and was requested by Rockin' Movies with Tyler, formerly Rockin' Real Riffs and Reviews. It's a record that Crash gave some high praise to. I wasn't really too familiar with this act, with this band, but you know, listening to this album, I can see what the fuss is about. I can see why people are digging it. You know, I think it's a pretty solid enough record. I like the production. I think that the heavy, thick riffage sounds really good. It's really dense. It's got some flavors that remind me of like Baroness on tracks like Blind and Dreaming, and tracks like Believer almost remind me of the lighter side of Mastodon. So I definitely hear the influence of this band, and I feel like they do a good job at standing themselves apart from those bands, especially with the vocals. I love the intensity on the opener Drifter. I think that there's some really solid riff work, and I love the on that track in particular. And I like a lot of the vocals on here. I feel like sometimes they don't necessarily fit the instrumentation like on Blind and Dreaming. I think the production and the sounds of that suit just a different vocal timbre than the vocalist delivers. And while I enjoy it, I don't think it's as good as some of the bands that I've drawn, that I could see sort of a parallel to. You know, this almost reminds me of the band Red Fang. They're another band of this ilk that does this very sludgy, stonery style rock music. But I will say, one of the things I do enjoy about this band are when the vocals get really aggressive. When their vocalist does his screams, it fits the sounds really well. I just feel like his clean vocals don't necessarily consistently match across the board, and that's the album's biggest detractor to me personally. But I honestly think that this is a solid-ass record. I don't think it has anything on it that's super outright terrible. Like I said, I love the dense production. I love even how the acoustic guitars sound when they're brought into the mix. I think that they're a tight batch of musicians just churning out some good stoner-tinged rock. And I feel like if you enjoy some of the bands that I mentioned, or you just like that whole stoner rock aesthetic with a little bit more of a hardcore edge at points, you'll enjoy this project. I definitely think it's worth your time. I've heard worse albums of this style, for sure. I'm giving this a 7. It's pretty solid. It's well worth your time. I meant to get to this record sooner because I enjoyed Thundercat. I think it's a really good bassist, and I loved the collaborations and songs of his that I've heard thus far in his career. And ever since this record dropped, I've always kind of sat with it in the back of my mind, like, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it. And I finally have, and I enjoy it. I think it's really, really solid. I think it's pretty damn good, honestly, across the board. I think it's a very consistent record, tune-wise. I've, obviously followed kind of the general populace's opinion on this project, and I would agree with some of the complaints that this record has received, in some regards. Namely, the biggest one that I agree with wholeheartedly is that the mixing and production is a little inconsistent across the board. Namely, the biggest stinger for me is one of the opening tracks, Interstellar Love, which has an amazing composition to it. I love the music of that song, but the production is just a mess. You know, it holds back some of the song's greatest strengths. You know, the composition and melody is beautiful, but the mix is cacophonous, and it kind of stands out like a sore thumb, especially when you compare it to a track that I think is really well produced, the tribute to Lewis Cole, I Love Lewis Cole, which combines Thundercat's bass with Lewis Cole's drumming incredibly well production-wise, and I like that song. But I'll get to that more in a minute. But I feel like that's a great 1-2 example of like the record's inconsistencies in that regard, and I feel like as a whole, the project could have done with one more pass through the mixing board. But as a whole, I think that this record does a good job at presenting a holistic experience through the artist's eyes, through Thundercat's eyes. You know, I love how He utilizes his features incredibly well. Like Ty Dolla $ign on Fair Chance, I think he shines really well on that track. I think Zach Fox is utilized perfectly on Overseas, and I love how tracks like that and Dragon Ball Durag do a good job at extending those more comedic elements of Thundercat's music that he continues to integrate into it. I mean, Dragon Ball Durag has become like a certified TikTok bop. So, you know, I mean, and I think it fits really well within that culture and, you know, Thundercat's whole aesthetic as a whole. And I enjoy, and I like how he also tries to use those comedic elements as a sort of veil of comfort in the world that we're in now, like on Miguel's Happy Dance, to kind of dance the troubles away while also addressing them more up front on a track like Black Qualls, you know, overcoming your own paranoia and stuff, which is an incredible cut with a whole list of features, all of which do a great job at presenting something to the track. In tandem with that, I also love how he has these tributes as a whole to either guests or friends of his, like I Love Lewis Cole, which is an incredible song. I love Lewis Cole as well. I'm a big Knower fan. I think Knower is phenomenal. And I think Lewis Cole is an incredible musician. His drumming is next fucking level. I don't think I've ever talked about Knower on the channel, but I love him. Been following him for a long time. And I think that Lewis Cole's drumming is fucking unmatched by a lot in his scene. And I feel like he's one of the more underrated artists in that relative scene. But also on the closing track, the title track, It Is What It Is, which sort of embodies a lot of the mood that the record presents, while also acting as a tribute to Mac Miller in a very touching way. And I enjoy that as well. And I think that it's fitting as well as a good closer to the whole experience. All in all, I think this record is very, very good. I think that Thundercat brought together some pretty tight shit. You know, I just feel like a couple more passes through the mixing board, reined in some of the production issues, and you'd have a much more quality product, because his playing is great. I love the bass lines on here. I think it's some of his strongest of his career at some points. Again, I like the features, and I like his melding of serious and comedic subject matter in a harmonious fashion. But again, that big hindrance, man. It's not the worst production I've heard on a record of its ilk, and that's why I'm not giving it as harsh of a grade as I've seen some of my contemporaries give, because I like this album a lot. I think it's very good. I'm giving it an 8. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. I think it's fantastic. I just would have liked it more if it were produced a little better. It sings its song for me. The next album I decided to check out to review was the newest Remo Drive record, A Portrait of an Ugly Man. A record that I wouldn't say I was the most excited for, if only because I didn't really like their sophomore album, Natural Everyday Degradation. I just think they didn't harness the production style they wanted to go for as well as they could have, especially since the production on their first record was so drastically different. And while this record still kind of drifts away from the sound that a lot of people came to them for on Greatest Hits, I think that this record is a little better than the record before it, and I feel like people are being a little too harsh on it personally. You know, I still don't think that this is a gold star record, but I think that it's a step up, and I enjoy some of the sonic elements on here a decent amount. I really enjoy the bass playing on tracks like Dead Man and If I Ever Look Too Deep in Thought. I love the propulsion on the track The Ugly Man Sings. I love the hook on the track Star Worship. You know, I love the tune on the track The Night I Kidnapped Remo Drive. You know, I like the vocals on that track. You know, there's elements of this record that I really enjoy, and I think they do a better job at harnessing their production style better than on their previous record. But I still think that there's something missing from this. There's something missing from the sound of this band. You know, they could rein it in a little more. Some of the soundscapes on here feel a little too open-aired for the style that they're aiming for, and I feel like that's the biggest hindrance to it. You know, I feel like their vocalist is coming into his own with embracing this style. Again, I think the band sounds a little tighter on here, and I really like the bass grooves on here. I'd like to see them experiment more with this, rein it in a little more, maybe find a producer that suits what they're going for a little better, and they could pull together something even more quality, because I think that, again, this is a step up. You know, it's not quite the same heights that were on their debut, but there's something here. There's promise here, in my opinion. I think that it's got some cool ideas. You know, I like some of the melodies. Again, I'm obsessed with the bass grooves on here. I enjoy the bass. I think the bass is really nice. You know, I think the bassist kills it on a couple of tracks on here, whole stop. But it just needs a little more. Needs a little more fine-tuning. They're getting there. You know, if they want to distance themselves from the beginnings that they had, that's understandable, that's fine. Sometimes it's hard to really capitalize on a sound in a way that works for you, and you just want to experiment more. I totally understand that, you know, and I think that they could. There's something there. They just need to tighten it up more. I don't know. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this. I think it's solid. I feel like if you like pop, you know, leaning rock music with a slightly emo tinge with the vocals, you know, with an indie touch to the production, you'll enjoy parts of this. You know, it's not like Shopping's new record where the production kind of suited really well with the grooves they were going for, but it definitely works in its own regard. And I think that it's a quality record. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. Still not a gold star, but definitely not the worst I've heard this year. What you hate, don't wait, don't wait. Some of you may remember I think I talked about it this year and last year, because this album's kind of been in production for a while, but I've been excited for this sort of comeback by the Wisconsin Death Trip era Static X guys, bringing a project together to sort of act as a tribute to Wayne Static. For those who don't know, Static X is one of the first bands I reviewed on the channel. I got a soft spot in my heart for their sound. They're very old, like, indebted to their era, industrial metal. But recently, the original guys from the Wisconsin Death Trip era, Tony Campos, Ken Jay, and Koichi Fukuda, came through with some archived recordings that Wayne had done before he passed in 2014, and started to bring together a record to act as a sort of tribute to Wayne called Project Regeneration, which is now called Project Regeneration Volume 1. And I don't know how many of these they plan on doing, but as far as this album goes, I think it's a really nice, touching send-off to Wayne and their sound as a whole. I don't know how much mileage they can get out of this, but I feel like this, at least, is a solid enough record. You know, I think it's a better send-off to their sound than Cult of Static was. I like the aesthetic of the sound here. I could see it being a turn-off for people because it is very much of his age. I mean, the synthesizer tones on Follow, Worth Dying For, and Terminator Oscillator in particular just sound very of their time. That late 80s or late 90s, early 2000s synthesized cybernetic style is in full effect on this project. And if you don't like that sound, you're not going to like it. But again, I have a soft spot for it, so I enjoy this. And I like a lot of what's here, you know, as a fan of this band. I think that the hook work on here is pretty solid, like on Hollow and on Untitled Placebo, which has its own sort of heavy aggression to it. And it again acts as another notch and another sort of box to check off for a Static X project of having an Otsego song. Same with Terminator Oscillator and Bring You Down having other really good hooks. One of the big drawbacks that I feel like I don't like about this record is that instead of having Tony Campos do a lot of the low-end growls, I feel like they have the stand-in for Wayne that they've had on the live shows do it, which I don't enjoy because I've always liked the sort of pairing of Wayne and Tony's vocals. I think that they marry really well together. Wayne's high-pitched, shrill scream with Tony's low-end growl. I think they work really well with the sonic palette that this band chooses to work with. But outside of that, this record is solid. It's very, very solid to me. Again, I could see why people wouldn't like it. If you don't like these sounds, you're not going to like this record. But I enjoy it. I think it's solid. It's not their best work, but it's pretty good. Like, I think it's better than some of the weaker moments in their career, and I feel like, again, it's well worth your time if you like this sort of thing. I'm giving this a 7. Maybe a weird rating. It may stick out like a sore thumb across the board, but hey, that's what we critics do. We give our 2 cents and tell you what we like as opposed in conflicts to our palate. Now, if you're wondering when I'm going to do a reformatted discography review for this band now, it's going to go on the Patreon live this month, and it's not going to go public on the channel until next year. So if you want to get access to it, check the Patreon this month. It's funny, I'd been following Enter Shikari for so long in the hopes that they would really wow me, and they finally did, to a full holistic experience on their 2017 record, The Spark, which saw them injecting a lot of huge pop melodies and a very everything bombast to their sound that I feel like suited them very, very well. And on their follow-up, Nothing is True and Everything is Possible, they seemingly do their best to integrate those ideas with their whole career's sound in a very strange blanket. This record is something else because it sees them pulling off the same sounds that were on the Spark with grace, like on the 1-2 punch that is the opener, The Great Unknown, and crossing the Rubicon along with tracks like The Pressure's On, with some of the more heavier electronic leaning sounds like on Modern Living and its follow-up, Apocalypse Anonymous, which has a very dubstep drop-infused sound that reminds me a lot of their earlier single, Destabilized, which is what got me into them in the first place. But also going a step further by also including just these weird offshoots like the Waltzing Off the Face of the Earth, to some that don't come next to each other in the track listing but have their own flavor to present, along with some of the other weird offshoots and interludes that this album aims for. This is a bizarre record, and I feel like it's not as concise and as cohesive as The Spark, but I don't think that that's as big of a detractor as it could potentially be. I feel like they harness all of these different sounds under the umbrella of the bombast that was on The Spark pretty fucking well. I like the catchy moments. I like the weird moments. I don't hate the electronics. Sure, I don't like this album as much as The Spark, but I also don't dislike it as much as some of my friends and peers do. I think it's a solid enough record, and I feel like it could have gone a lot worse. They could have faltered far more easily on this project because they're attempting to do a lot more, and it is a very weird experience. But you guys know, I love weird music. I love music with a sense of a strangeness at its core. I think that bombast is what sets it above records in the discography like the Minesweeper that I wasn't a big fan of, because it's bombast and harnessing of that energy in a very bright way just keeps it from sounding like a muddled dose of mediocrity that albums like the Minesweeper kind of felt like to me. And this is definitely something to that accord, and I think that if you like strange music or you like The Spark and you want to see them integrate their sound more into the sounds and aesthetic that was on The Spark, you'll enjoy this record for sure, but it may not be for everyone. Just a forewarning for that. But I'm giving this a 7. I think it's perfectly fine. I enjoy it a lot, honestly.
4-4 got a kickback, click clack, get back, shots hit your rip back.
Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I was an expert on Pop Smoke's first couple of tapes, or I was a diehard fan of his, but I will say, with this being my first full exposure to him as an artist, outside of hearing stuff here and there and hearing the name pop up in circulation, it's sad that he is actually gone and that this debut album acts as a posthumous debut, because this guy had some talent in a way that I really respect and enjoy, and I feel like he acts as a very different type of voice for the scene than a lot of his contemporaries do. You know, his delivery is a lot more rugged in New York in a way that this scene, I don't hear a lot in this scene, and I enjoy a lot out of it. You know, tracks like Aim for the Moon and the tracks where he's by himself, like 44 Bulldog and Yeah, do a good job at showcasing his talents, you know, and how well he can bounce off of features, like having Quavo on Aim for the Moon, a track that I actually really enjoy. You know, I think Quavo, out of the 3 times Quavo shows up on this project, that's probably my favorite. Or a track like Make It Rain, which also has a good pairing of him and his feature, Rowdy Rebel, who contributed his while incarcerated, and I think matches the tone of the song very, very well. I also enjoy the track with 50 Cent and Roddy Ricch, even if Pop Smoke himself isn't on the song much. I think Roddy really shines on that song, and I think 50's alright on it as well. You know, I think that this project, while a little bloated, isn't the worst thing in the world. I enjoy this a decent amount. You know, I feel like it's a shame because he had a voice that seemed very different. His low, gravelly delivery just suits the beats that he works with very, very well, and I love the focus on drill in the production as well. I think that it helps accent his lyrics and his delivery wholeheartedly. You know, I think that this record is fine. You know, there's some tracks I don't like. The Snitching, I don't think that track really works all too well. I don't like the Lil Baby Da Baby song either. I think that track as a whole is kind of a mess. I don't like the features at all. And I feel like the Sway Lee cut doesn't do as much for me either. But I like this record. I like the focusing, the balancing of the gangsta shit with the more romantic leaning songs. I think that he handles both subject matters very, very well. And the focusing on those more romantic or sex-driven songs works in a way that, again, kind of is different from a lot of people in his lane. And it's a shame that he's that he's dead, that he's gone. Because this posthumous debut album shows a lot of promise for this kid, and it sucks that he's not going to get to follow that up in any meaningful way. But I think this record is fine. It's solid enough as it is, and I am giving it a 6 out of 10.
Hey, chilling with the homies at the crib, bumping Pac Div.
On the other side of that, Logic, with the surprise announcement of his retirement and subsequent signing to a streaming deal with Twitch, he also dropped one last project. And I've talked a lot about his retirement with friends and stuff like that. I'll probably talk about it in a conversation. But his last record, as of at least now or forever, whatever, No Pressure, sort of sequel companion record to his debut album, Under Pressure. And it sees him coming together with No ID again, doing the production. And man, does he love talking about that, with the intro, with the Orson Welles samples, and that done throughout kind of the whole project. Same with the digitized voice of saying the behind the scenes of what really went through the writing process of this record. Logic really wanted to nail down that aspect of this, that sort of finality and grandeur and presentation. And I think that that's, you know, it's all nice and good. But what about the music? What does the music contain? What's the quality of the music in this project? Well, it's good. It's solid. You know, it's the best Logic project in a little while. You know, I've kind of grown to be this speaker against a lot of Logic's music. But I started off liking the guy in college. I think I've talked about that a handful of times. Like, he's a guy that I used to have a decent amount of interest in. He just kept doing too much. But on No Pressure, he seemingly cuts a lot of the shit that didn't work, and he's kind of having fun. And I think the production is a big companion to that. You know, the production is really smooth on here. I think that it's really nice. It has a flavor that he's tried to replicate on projects like Young Sinatra 4 Points, but it just doesn't hit like it does on this project. You know, this project, it just hits different. You know what I mean? But in tandem with that, just the general tone and the things that he's doing on this project that he's tried to do on recent projects just feel a little more gracefully handled, like on tracks like GP4, where he seemingly is kind of doing an Outkast homage with the hook of that. It feels more, it feels like it lands better than it did on like Supermarket with the Can I Kick It sort of reference to A Tribe Called Quest. You know, I think that his general delivery on here feels a lot smoother. It's reflective in a lot of instances, like on Dad Bod, where he kind of talks about how he doesn't do the things that he used to do, and while people expect that of him, because he's grown. You know, he's had a growth as a person, and I think that that's good that he's getting to do that. Or on tracks like Open Mic Aquarius, where he just kind of delivers a really tight, well-constructed track with some really good bars. This project as a whole feels like a celebration of his career as a whole, and a sort of reflection of the progress that he's made. And I really appreciate that. You know, again, it's not mind-blowing, it's not of-the-year material by any stretch of the imagination, but as someone who started the career that we just passed, as a moderate Logic fan, and think that he started his career off on a pretty decent foot, he's ending his rap career on just as decent of a foot, in my opinion.
It's definitely still wrapped up in his neuroses, but I don't know if that's enough to really weigh this album down to me personally, because I was kind of surprised at how consistent I dug the flavors that this record was dishing. That's why I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.
Hand under my sweatshirt, baby, kiss it better.
While there are senses of the familiar within Taylor Swift's surprise, intimate feeling record Folklore, she definitely seemingly tries to expand the familiarity into realms that seem adjacent to the sounds that she may have loved upon her, fruitful beginnings, but seemingly left to the wayside when she decided to adorn a more pop-coded sheen. Taylor Swift has been a nice uptick since her huge flop Reputation, which saw her completely missing the mark and expanding on her pop-centric sound seen on her personal favorite record, 1989. But I feel like on Lover, she seemingly found a way to meld the poppier ideas and sort of wrapped up in its own emotional buoyancy side of 1989 and translate it into a more emotional package that, while still better than Reputation, didn't quite reach the heights of 1989 to me personally. However, I enjoy Folklore for a completely different reason. Like I said, there's moments of the familiar to some aspects within Taylor Swift's roots, like on Betty, or on August, or on sort of her vocal delivery on The Last Great American Dynasty. But even some of those moments, or moments like the Bon Iver duet Exile, which has an incredible switch up between the verse driven by homie Bon Iver and Taylor Swift, that I also really enjoy and feels like something that could fit really snugly within one of Taylor Swift's various dissections of relationships and love. Its soundscape still feels intrinsically different than a lot of what she's toyed with in recent years, and I really enjoy that. While this kind of makes sense for her career to go for as far as adorning a more mature, moodier, cold sound, I think she handles it very, very gracefully. I enjoy a lot of the textures on here, and it actually kind of reminds me of a different record with a black and white cover that toys with chamber pop aesthetics and act as a sort of different coat over a particular artist's sound that I talked about very recently on the internet. But this feels like a little bit more of a sonic expansion than that record may have to some people. And I like this record all the more. I like that it balances these rootsier, chambery atmospheres and acoustically driven stuff like some of the songs I mentioned, with a more synthetic but still cold feeling atmosphere, like on the great single Cardigan, which melds the worlds really well together, or on My Tears Ricochet, which combines those synthetic textures with a huge sense of grandeur with the multiple layered vocals. There's a lot of sounds on here that I really enjoy, and I think that it personally, sonically, just resonates with me in a very, aesthetically driven sort of way. I dig the vibe of this record a lot more than Lover, if only because I like the sounds on here. They're sounds that I enjoy when other artists pursue them. But I also like how she delivers her message on this record. Like I said, Exile feels like it could conceptually fit on another Taylor Swift project, but the addition of Bon Iver, the fact that he sort of leads the track in the beginning, gives it a completely different feeling that feels intrinsically tied to the tone and mood of this project wholeheartedly. I like this record a lot. I like that it also continues threads of lyrics and styles pursued on Lover in the aspects of like a mad woman, but again, in a much different avenue. I think this record is really solid. I like it more than Lover. I still don't know if I like it as much as 1989, just because that record is so very magical to me. This record for sure doesn't have a Shake It Off, which is something that you could say is a positive in its credit for sure. But I feel like as a whole, this record definitely comes close to a quality that you could relate to something as one of her greater records in her discography. Full stop. I love the sounds of this. I love the writing. I love her delivery. It's a nice mix of earnestness, like on 7 and August and Mad Woman, with some huger, more luscious sounds that I feel like are a great place for her sound to go. I'm giving this a 7. It's very, very good.
Hearts over ice.
So, like Pop Smoke, I'm not going to say that I was a huge Juice WRLD fan. I'd heard singles, I heard songs here and there. I thought he was fine. I thought out of the emo rap guys, he was alright. You know, I liked him more than Lil Uzi Vert as a whole. I think he tapped into the trap sound in a really nice way. That whole emo rap, trap spin very, very well. And on his posthumous record, Legends Never Die, he seemingly was, or whoever pulled it together, himself in tandem with whoever finished the record, seemingly captured a similar space and sound that gives me very similar feelings that Circles did, the Mac Miller project, but it's much more indebted to its style and Juice WRLD's whole aesthetic as a whole. But I like it. It's sad. It's very sad. You know, there's moments where he talks about his sorrow, his sadness, like on Bad Energy and Titanic, or Life's a Mess. He has these whole darker images that he's spun in other songs, like on Conversations. But there's also a great sense of harnessing that and producing it in a way that I feel like is a little more full, at least than the samples of Juice WRLD's music that I've heard in the past. I really like some of the sonic choices on this project. Like, I love the guitars on Righteous. I think that they suit that trap aesthetic very, very well and give it that emo blend in a way that I didn't really resonate the same with me that as other songs that I had heard did. I even think that a track like Hate the Other Side, who has one of the more pop-leaning EDM producers out there, Marshmello, pulling together a sound that doesn't feel too much of an offshoot or detract or distract from the overall tone and pacing of the record. This is a cohesive-ass, solid project that I think has a lot of good vibes, a lot of good tunes, and Juice WRLD's performances on here are pretty consistent across the board. You know, the hooks are catchy when they need to be, and it's nothing too ambitious, but I think that it's a straight and narrow pop-leaning trap emo project that executes itself pretty well. You know, I don't hate this thing. There's some tracks that I like more than others. I think Tell Me You Love Me with Triple Red isn't necessarily my favorite track on here. It's one of the weaker tracks on here. Same with some of the stuff in the tail end that seems to sort of double down on some of the aesthetics established in previous songs, earlier songs in the track listing without anything super gratifying. But it's consistent enough and solid enough as it is. I don't hate it. I definitely think that there's worse that the genre can churn out, and I think that its production is a lot more harnessed in a way that some of his contemporaries may not necessarily tap into. And again, it sucks that he's gone. It sucks to see a young voice snuffed out or gone so soon, you know, and it sucks because you never really know. You're left asking, what if they got to stay? And just like Pop Smoke's newest record or debut album, I was left with Legends Never Die, wondering really if Juice WRLD could have continued to expand upon his sounds. You know, could he have harnessed some of the guitar production on here in a more rock-leaning sense? Could he have made like just a straight-up emo rock record, and would it have nailed as well? Because there's moments on here that make me feel like he could have, and it would have been interesting to see what he would have done with that. But sadly, we'll never know. But as it sits, I will stand with this at a 7. I think that it's very solid. I think that it's very okay. It's very worth your time. Could use with a little trim, but it's nothing, again, overtly offensive. This new Neck Deep record, though, I'm not digging as much. I've always been a little lukewarm to Neck Deep's sound. I've never thought that they were the best new pop-punk band. I've thought that their more raw-centric production was interesting, but I wouldn't say that they've written, as a whole, projects that have wowed me as much as others. They haven't written anything terrible, but nothing that I would say is a favorite of mine. However, this new record, All Distortions Are Intentional, is a stark drop in quality. I mean, I'm even more pressed to listen to the earlier stuff to see if I like it more, because I really don't like the direction of this project. I think the production is way too clean and sheen. There's not an ounce of scuff on the damn thing. You know, right down to the vocals. Imperfections are cleaned up to a disgusting degree, like on the opener Sonderland or the track Low Life. The auto-tune is so apparent on there, and it detracts from any sort of edge that could have been on the vocals, and the production leaves the guitars feeling lifeless and the drums feeling hollow. There's a moment on, I think it's Fall, that has this 80s ass, like this hair metal breakdown in the bridge that was disgusting. I just didn't enjoy. I thought it was a tone and flavor that doesn't fit pop punk in a real sense. And as a whole, the record has playing that doesn't suit the sort of tone that this band started off with. I don't like this thing at all. I feel like it's the antithesis of what growth and progression for a pop punk band would really lean towards. It's definitely poppy, for sure. There's hooks all over this goddamn thing. But do I think they're worth a damn? Hell no. I don't like this record because it feels like, and it feels like a big 180, because I feel like The Peace and the Panic had production that felt more in line with this genre than this. This just feels like such a distant, you know, relative to any sounds they were exploring before that it's hard to even call it like something that you would expect this band to do. It comes out of left field, to me personally anyway. They're not a band that I follow all that closely, but I do remember their last record, at least, didn't sound a damn thing like this, and I liked it a hell of a lot more than this. This record didn't do anything for me. I thought it was boring. I thought it was too safe, too clean, and edgeless. Edgeless punk. That's what this new Neck Deep record is. It's nothing special. It's nothing that I really would see myself revisiting, and this is up there for me for like one of the worst albums I've heard of the year so far. I'm giving this a 3, if only because some of the guitars are salvageable, but that's about it. A lot of the sounds on here aren't interesting. A lot of the hooks are predictable, and a lot of the sounds are predictable.
Watch out, I'm shut down.
And the last record I checked out this month is the newest Oliver Tree record, Ugly is Beautiful. And I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar with Oliver Tree. I know who he is. I've seen his appearances on the H3 podcast. I watched Anthony's interview with him. I've seen some of the memes, but I haven't been following this guy as closely as others in the scene might have. And so I don't have the context. I don't have the context to the growth. I know the story of this record. You know, he's been wanting to put it out. He's been dropping singles here and there, but the label's been, you know, holding him back. That sucks, because I feel like a lot of these songs would have hit a lot harder, like, 2-3 years ago. This album's fine. I don't hate it. I think that it has its fun moments. You know, it's definitely poppy. It's definitely catchy. I like 1993 a lot. I like the sort of weird accompaniment on Alien Boy, and I enjoy the more emotional moments like Cash Machine and Hurt. But as a whole, I mean, the record isn't anything that I would say is groundbreaking. It's definitely got some cool moments. I know he himself has made a meme out of the 21 Pilots thing, if that gives you any context to when I'm finishing up this video. And I mean, it's there. It's definitely there. Like, it's a comparison that's really hard to miss. His vocal delivery is very reminiscent of 21 Pilots. I think the one time it doesn't really get super 21 Pilots-ish is the rapping part on Bury Me Alive. He has a way of sonically distancing himself from that, which is interesting given 21 Pilots as a huge alternative hip-hop influence. But he does a good job, at least on that track, of distancing himself sonically from that group. But I feel like as a whole, a lot of the singing, a lot of the emotional singing, a lot of some of the production on here feels very in line with 21 Pilots. And given I'm not like a 21 ride or die, I think it's fine. I think Oliver Tree does a decent job at taking their sound and doing something a little bit different with it. In some of the beat choices and production ideas, you know, but I don't think that this album's terrible by any means. I think it's fine. I think it's solid enough as it is. I think that he definitely is trying to tap into some sort of emotional core in some of these moments, and I feel like it does resonate to some degree, but it's also weird to see somebody who's wrapped up in so many memes tackle something so sonically serious like that. But I think it comes across pretty well. You know, I don't think it's the worst thing I've heard all year. It's very, very solid. It's nothing that I would say is album of the year worthy to me personally, but I think that it is worth your time. If you enjoy a good pop rock song, if you like 21 Pilots and you want to see like the meme version of 21 Pilots, listen to this record. It's got its moments. It's got its hooks. It's got its sound that I feel like could resonate with people in a way more than me. But as it stands, I think the record is fine. I think it's solid enough as it is. I'm going to be giving it a 6 out of 10. Yeah, and that was the month. I apologize for the composition and construction of this video. If it seems a little looser or more brief, I apologize. But this month, while there were some records I really, really enjoyed, I haven't found a whole lot that I would say I loved over the past month, and that's kind of upsetting to me personally. There's albums that might grow on me. I could see myself revisiting the Taylor Swift record, especially as the days get colder and the world gets more isolated. And there's definitely stuff in here that feels very in my lane as to why I gave it a positive review. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like this listening log update, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdy content, be sure to subscribe. I post 6 to 7 vids a week, usually around these topics, so if you like this video, you'll probably like something that I make. If you want to take that a step further and support me on Patreon, you're more than welcome to do so. Special thanks to my patrons. If you do decide to join their ranks, you get early access to content, exclusive content, and you help drive the community. As of today, or yesterday, but I made it a public post today, I dropped my monthly update talking about what I'm going to be doing over the next month, both on here and on Patreon. So if you want to see that, it's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. Thank you so very much for watching. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.